Good morning. I'm a PhD candidate from TU Delft, Department of Architecture. It's a very great honor to be part of this network, and thanks to the organization committees who offer me this opportunity to communicate my thoughts with people who share the same experience on the topic of complexity. So although I'm not so technically involved in this field of research, but still the area of complexity has resolved a lot of my doubts about this world we situate. And I think that complexity is something that we can see from various perspectives. So the paper that I'm presenting today is my personal learning process of complexity. It introduces a perspective towards complexity in the urban transformation process and emphasizes the ability to co-evolve with the transitions of space and society as collectives and entities. So I hope that my presentation today could enrich the cultural geography of this conference. And by introducing a case study of historical urban center in the capital city of China as illustration of the issue of complexity that we deal with as planners and designers in the different society. So the structure of my presentation consists of a very simple story consists of 5 parts. First, I would explain you the challenges of the rising complexity in the urban transformation process in the post-reform era in China since 1978, and then under this situation, the conditions for co-evolution was generated in this process, and I'm also going to explain why is it important to comprehend the co-evolution and complexity in urban planning in China. And then, in order to reappropriate the notion of complexity in a different context, I look into particularly the various approaches to complexity in different planning cultures. And then I will illustrate my understanding by a case study about the complexity of historical urban area in its transition in Beijing, China. Finally, I go to my conclusion of co-evolutionary view on the collectives in the complex urban context. So, Chinese cities have experienced major changes in the past decades since reform and opening up policy in 1978. The economic, spatial, and social transformation has imposed challenges to our urban planning discipline in China. So most crucially, the restructuring of national economy from as we all know, from central planned economy to free market economy has led to the decentralization of governance and reformation of planning institutions. So the structure of the planning institutions was largely transformed and decentralized in this era. So the power of what is related to our discipline is that the power of decision making for urban planning projects was largely shifted to provincial and municipal planning and governance institutions, and involving the diverse types of agents in the planning process. So the types of agents were way more diverse than it used to be before the 1978. And especially in financing the projects, the rising of private enterprises has generated flexibility and uncertainty in this new era. So in a time of speed, driven by the demand of rapid urbanization, and most of the modernized city regions were planned and developed in 20th century post-reform era by the top-down planning principle, which operates a rather singular line of interaction among national and regional and local planning authorities and the developers. Also, the social spatial transformation in cities cannot be seen from official media, but in the everyday practice of urban life. It is pervasively influenced by the force of globalization and the cross-cultural exchange with global West, and performing a ascending degree of diversity and dynamics, and the process is still continuing today. So, for example, for me, each time I live in the Netherlands, but each time I went back to China, these social changes, like what happened in big cities in China, always surprised me, which is that's the fact that you cannot see from the official media in West or even in China. So you have to go there and experience how the minds of people and how the behavior patterns of the people were changed in this new era because of this force of globalization and a lot of influences from the West. So the cities and peoples are transforming. So being specific on the one hand, also the historical centers of traditional Chinese capitals showcase these conflicts between history and modern transformation, which is the main focus of my paper today. So as such, social dynamics co-evolving with spatial transformation has caused many problems, meanwhile inviting new debates in the field of urban planning, welcoming the new era of globalization. So this study presented the idea raised from the shifting realities in Chinese cities, the co-evolutionary complexity, especially in the modern transformed historical urban areas, as perceivable evidence has made planning, policymaking, and investment less effective. So urban planning in China is transforming from a relatively linear, explicit process into a non-linear and self-organized interactive system with multiple interacting agents involved: governmental, non-governmental, public and private, material and immaterial, single and collective. So there's a strong call for an alternative perspective to approach the reality that allows planners to act with other agents and materials in the complex urban system of Chinese cities, along with the decentralization and transformation of economy, society, and space. So in the West, over the past decades, the study of complexity theory and urban planning added to the paradigmatic shift from the pre-established, rigid, divided planning categories to an evolutionary complex process, as well as a scientific reference to support this shift in planning discipline. So it was underlined in particular with the approaches that were investigated in two planning cultures. So one perceived urban planning as scientific discipline, and the other, vice versa, maps the spatial dynamics by sociological approaches. And both of the approaches were translated to planning vocabulary and modified by planners and designers in their practices. So I also apart from those two approaches, I also like the fact that planning and design practices it's standing in between the science and humanity and being like moderating the two. That's the fact that I really like. So all of those approaches to complexity have delivered a co-evolutionary view on our city and planning processes. So therefore, based on the understanding of the co-evolution and departing from the traditional structuralist approach, the new perspective towards the mechanism of urban planning investigates the possibilities instead of solutions. So returning to the core issue to be tackled in this article, the question could be raised as, what if we trace the co-evolutionary complexity and collectiveness in a culturally different context, where planners are faced with larger scale complexity, more chaos, and informality? So in order to answer this question, I put forward this case study of Xishanhai area of Beijing to illustrate how to operate on co-evolution in different cultural spheres. So in this case study, I'm going to explain you the conditions for co-evolution in this historical living center. So why it matters to this issue, and then I'm going also have qualitatively explain you the process of urban regeneration and development model based on hutong, which is the traditional dwelling settlements specifically in this city from the ancient time, and then the analysis and evaluation. So what kind of context are we dealing with in this project. Well, Beijing, it's the capital city, and it is a city with the size of the size of the city equals to half of Belgium, with a population of around 25 million, and it's like a large machine, and it's expanding based on this ring road structure. And in this one city, there could be perceived an unbalanced development stage because of 5 minutes. The ring road structure creates contrast of urban structure and unbalanced development in the inner circles and the out rings. So the center districts are receiving a deconstructive trend towards modernist urbanization, while the out rings area is still proceeding the expansion following the regimented planning schemes at top-down level. So the rationale of choosing the case of Shanghai for this study lies in the visible complexity entails in the self-organized, self-growing historical urban center in the national capital, developing time in different ways. So accepting and representing the changing in the society, maintaining its diversity and multiplicity as one of the most important historical living center and popular touristic spots of central Beijing. The area of Shanghai is located in the northwest of Within City, and it accommodates a large, diverse group of agents from perspective of complexity also. And then I will introduce you an urban regeneration project that was undertaken by the local government in 2001. In this post-reform era, the government of Beijing became one of the most powerful provincial decision-making authorities and started to propose planning schemes for the 25 historical conservation area of central Beijing, and among which these projects is the most important one. So on institutional level, the game was the battle between planning institution and business partners, tourist agencies and historical conservation department in the local government. And on the societal level, balancing the interests of the entrepreneurs and local residents, as well as a larger group of tourists, became the major planning assignment. And in the late imperial era, Shanghai used to be the most popular gathering place in summer in Beijing, which is, with its commercial function, an attractive public event. So after 1978, the area was gradually transformed into touristic districts, welcome people from all over the country and all over the world by its traditional urban fabric, consists of hutong and traditional dwelling settlements. So late in 2010, the rise of tourist industry has facilitated the transformation of this area, where the alleys was centered as biggest attraction. So though with a very little amount of money invested, around 200,000 euro, but this time still successfully stimulated self-organized, spontaneous construction process by the local residents. So the local residents offer their property to some private entrepreneurs, and they run their own local brands in this area, and attracting the tourists. And also some other, like the research agencies of the university, also introducing these areas, which where there could be perceived and very diverse types of activities going on. But however, in 2016, when I look back to the area again, I found two very distinctive facts that has illustrated this co-evolution process, because the previous established model was functioning only for 10 years, and then the problem started to occur. For example, there are two very distinctive problems. One is the replacement of the shops, the local shops, by the international chain stores, because those brands can gain more profit from the tourists. And also the exploding tourism has seriously disturbed the local lives and generates gentrification problems. So in 2016, when I went back, the area lost most of its local residents, and you can only see the tourists in this area. And then some of the properties and some of the nice historical buildings were closed because of the large amount of tourists. And so even in this well-controlled area, central area of Beijing, the most well-controlled area in China, still we can see informal settlements and these very poor condition of the streets under transitions. So that's it. This is my personal qualitative investigation in this area, and this project is still going on. And what kind of conclusion can I draw from this research? I think firstly we are entering a different era. So in China we can the traditional issues that are tackled in urban planning versus the complexity view, as a Western theory, like rising theory that has been raised in China in recent 10 years. And then I think the modeling process of the planning has to be seen as an endless and evolutionary process always in transition. So it become a matter of shifted way of thinking. So I'm here just to raise a thought, raise a perspective that in this planning process, the planners, how to act in this kind of complex social spatial context in the different contexts. So today also would like to maybe discuss with you guys how to act as a next step according to your own experience. Yeah. So thank you for your attention. That's my paper. And
wonderful. So respondent, we have Anne-Lou. Lovely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting presentation, and your interesting paper as well. I saw in your presentation that you evolved a little bit further than you've written down in your paper, so it's very interesting. Maybe I start with apologizing. I'm here getting acquainted with complexity theory, so I'm actually going to ask you some very basic questions that maybe everybody in the room already knows, but for me it's a way of getting to know complexity better, but I'm also trying to connect it with your case study as well, so maybe you can, by answering my question, you can get a little bit step further in your own research as well. So you started with the difference in the two approaches towards complexity and planning. So you have the scientific approach and the social theory-oriented approach, and then in your presentation you actually added as well the planning and design practice. Can you maybe explain to me a little bit better what the differences between these 2 or 3 approaches are? And then in the case study or in your case analysis, you seem to be referring mainly to the first approach, to the scientific approach. But then you conclude, insinuating a little bit, you really want to use the second approach. So I was wondering which of the approaches do you want to use and why, and then maybe you can reflect on what the differences are as well. And then maybe my third question is, in your conclusions, you refer to mapping the social dynamics in the area to know the future developments of the collectives. Can you explain a little bit more to me what are the dynamics you want to map? Who will be mapped, or what will be mapped? And what do you mean with collectives? So those are a lot of questions. Pick one of them.
Wow.
You have great time.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions. Yeah. Okay. Well, for me, complexity is not my primary research topic, but still I'm very interested in this, and also it becomes kind of a tool to comprehend a lot of facts and a lot of mysterious circumstances in the world. It helped me with understanding. And also I found like it could be implemented in various fields. For example, my own research is about public space, and I found that, of course, public space, the network of public space is also a complex network, and then also these, as you mentioned, the 2 approaches could act as a methodological input on my own research. So I think I'm going to explain you with my personal understanding because I'm not an expert in this, but I think according to my own case study, I think the scientific model may represent the official or the formal plans or the formal strategies that has been implemented in this area because it incorporates diverse agents. Yeah, even though it's a top-down approach, but still it involves a lot of different perspectives, and then it benefits diverse types of agents. As you can see, like in the past 10 years, it has been a very successful project. But in the social-oriented perspective, I think it's a matter of the dynamics, the social dynamics. So mapping the social dynamics, as I understand, is that we cannot. What we can do is, because the system is always co-evolving and transitional and always developing, and it's really difficult to grasp a structure. But then what we can do is just grasp the situation, the temporary situation, and then try to map the social, like try to consider different social actors, and then try to map their behavior and try to indicate the direction for the process. And your question is, what do you mean by collectives? Oh yeah, the collectives is the entities. I think because as I understand that the planning process is dealing with a group of agents, but not agent, but agents. So a group of collectives. Especially in these complex urban planning organizations, nothing is individual, but everything is collective. So you have a collective network in one department, and then all the departments form then another larger complex system as a bigger collectives. So that's my understanding of these collectives, as you ask. And what is?
No, thank you very much.
Well done. Let's open up to questions. Thanks, Wenwen. Wonderful stuff. And going a little bit further on the collective, I think you're right in conceptualising all those as little complex systems within themselves. But the collectives I'm more interested in are the community collectives. And so, because China is a very communitarian culture originally, it's very much about community rather than the individual, traditionally. I'm wondering, what have you noticed in the shifts in the social from, the collective way of thinking into the individualist way of thinking?
Yeah. That's a very good question, actually. According to my own observation in the social context in China, there is a very interesting phenomenon that within one city, like in the big cities, the people in the center or the more developed area are more proceeding a kind of individual way of behavior. Like especially when I went back. In the past years, each time I went back, I found because in the beginning I came to the Netherlands in 2013, and I found a big kind of cultural conflict because the life here is completely different than how people behave. But then I'm a kind of quite individual person when I was back in China, so I got into this context very quick. And then I was shocked by many phenomena that Western people do, and then I got into this context, and then after 2 years I went back to China, and I thought like, the Chinese people are still doing this, but I'm doing this, so I cannot go along with them. But actually no, because then I found what surprised me is that the social behavior pattern of Chinese people in the big cities in the center are exactly the same as Western people. What they think, what they do are exactly the same. But then back to my independent town because I'm from the capital city of my province, but I live in a small city like 1 hour there, and then in that city didn't change much. So that's what I related to spatial development, like in Beijing. There are like 7 round roads, and it's still expanding to an infinite expand. But like the very center, the first 3 ring roads in the center are really preceding a kind of post-industrial trend, as just exactly the same as what happened in the West in the past few years. But then after that, in the outrings of the city, it's still proceeding this rapid urban expansion and a lot of construction going on still, and the city is tending to incorporate the towns around it and become a super big city. So I think related to your question, I would say like the social changes that happened in one city, but the unbalanced development I think it's a very important issue that should be tackled in the future. So that's why I departed from the inside. What I thought it was the most likely to connect with the Western urban planning ideologies, because we are now entering the same era as the Western cities.
We had a slide at the beginning where you identified the conditions of co-evolution that you were talking about. Do you think that these conditions are external in a way from like the places that you have analyzed, or are they internal from the system?
I think Beijing is one of those examples. It's very distinctive examples because it's the capital of China, and it's of course the economic development is very advanced. But I think if you look at within the whole country, there are several of these kind of examples, like the cities around the coast, like Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. Yeah, they are facing, of course, the cultural context is different. The South China and North China are very different in history. But I think in terms of these conditions of co-evolution and this unbalanced development of the region, I think they kind of have the same kind of conditions. Yeah, they have the same conditions for this co-evolutionary planning, like with complexity perspective.
Yeah, briefly clarifying question. So what I find really fascinating is that you take us along in how the formal and the informal coexist in the Chinese context, and also the rural collectives playing that. Then you also mentioned, you referred to self-organizing mechanisms, and I was puzzling because I was also struggling with this myself for a while. What do you exactly then consider to be these self-organizing processes? So what kind of spontaneous physical patterns or social patterns have you been analyzing in your case, or did you identify?
I think the social patterns. Well, the spatial pattern, of course. If back in like 10 years ago, when I visited this area, you wouldn't see these kind of so many informal dwellings, informal settlements. But now it is. It's well located in a beautiful touristic lake, and then you see these kind of informal, like the creepy houses, and also back in that time. Like if you can see from this picture, this is also the touristic area where people are cycling along this lake. But actually, back in 2011, there are no cyclers, and only the local people, like the local people that are sitting under the tree and playing chess. But now I went there, and all people are gone. They're no longer there anymore. And then when I remember that when I was in the airport, I met a local person, and she said like she used to live in the center, but then she now moved to the area near the airport because they cannot afford the price there, and then they and also they are all occupied by tourists, and they cannot live in there because they're lacking of facilities. They're all occupied by the tourists.
So it are the best patterns that are produced by individual tourists or individual households that move from one side to another, that make the area shift in how it functions?
I think there are two reasons. One is the top-down. On the top-down level, the model that they proposed was largely benefits the public entities, public actors. So who are benefiting from this model? I think the local the tourist industry, of course, and then the local some enterprises of those international brands like Starbucks. Those are, and also of course the public people like the tourists from all over the country. But then from the bottom up level, I think. Sorry, what is?
Okay. The patterns they cause.
Oh yeah, the patterns.
Initiative.
Yeah, the bottom up, I think, is because previously the local residents are cooperating with the officials to offer their properties and to accommodate the tourists, open their own business. But now they are a lot of them shut down spontaneously because they cannot compete in gaining profit with those big stores. So then it's kind of a pity that it caused the losing identity of this area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, look, thank you, and let's show our appreciation. Wonderful. So our next presentation we're going on to Portugal for informal service in Portugal. Please introduce yourself and I look forward to your presentation.